Whoa.
Happy day, Kelly.
Whoa. There you go.
Not supposed to happen.
No.
I'm not a diva about many things, but my spot on this side, it's like a comfy pair of slippers.
Yes,
How are you?
we will keep you over there.
Thank you. I'm grateful.
Well, I'm very grateful to be here because this is not our usual. So being here is a very big honor because we have a very special guest. So
we do, and we only make exceptions to pre-record episodes for people who are, just out of the box, cool and special. And that is definitely Dr. Michelle St. Jane. And she truly embodies what it means to be a living legend. So without further ado, let's bring Dr. Michelle on and have a real candid conversation about, what it means to have unshakable confidence. Even sometimes if you quiver, to really, remain unshakable and follow that alignment and that inspiration and be a living legend.
Boom.
Boom.
Hello.
Dr. Michelle, oh, this is not cute. We're not going to be doing that for you. We didn't mean to scare you like that.
Yeah, sorry about that.
We're cute at a distance.
Thank you. Emma, you might need to correct my name. It's just ST in the Saint.
Kelly.
ST?
Yeah, please.
That's Kelly. Kelly.
Wonderful to be here. I'm just so grateful for the privilege to share some time and conversation and wisdom with you ladies.
Well, you're the wise one. I mean, I've had the privilege to have had a conversation with you, off the camera, and I'm just blown away by the life you've had. Most people don't live in. I'm not saying that to be rude. It's just, you've lived, it feels like many lifetimes in this one life. And I think that's so remarkable. And always what I've aspired to do. It's hard for me to sit still in one lane because I'm so curious about many things. And you're the first person and woman who embodies all of those things that I aspire to be.
You're well on your way. I mean, the show just rocks. I love Flip the Switch, and I've really enjoyed your episodes. And the wisdom is in the room, ladies. I've listened, and you certainly deliver. So, gratitude for that. These conversations are so important in the world. If we don't have them, we don't learn. And now that we're virtual, more people have a chance to share how they show up in the world, and they can also share what they have traveled through. You can either go through it or you can grow through it. And frankly, if you grow through it, you have a duty to share the wisdom and what you've learned.
I love that. It's awesome. Your duty, because, so many times people go through, terrible situations, traumatic experiences, a lot of pain, and come out more than just surviving, on the other side, thriving. And yet sometimes the shame of not having been different in those situations, or handled the situation differently, or not having seen the red flags, or whatever it is, keeps us very sheltered and not wanting to share. And it's so healing, but it's empowering as well.
And of course, you're as sick as your secrets. So they do not serve us. And generations that have come before my generation certainly had a lot of secrets they were unwilling to share. And we have a lot of gifts that come through them. I can give the example of my parents split up when I was 8 years old. And at that time, I grew up in New Zealand. It was shameful to be in a broken home. So I was going to be a pregnant teenager, and my brother was going to be a criminal or delinquent. So I ended up sharing that my dad was dead. It took a lot of therapy to come to grips with. That was a child strategy that was effective at that time. But the guilt and shame did not need to travel with me.
That resonates so deeply, because, my mother was an alcoholic and left my life when I was 3 months old, and was raised by my grandmother. And that's what I used to tell people when people would say, why do you live with your grandmother? Why is your mom so old? I would say my mother has passed. And then when she did die, it was like, the shame of getting into the details of, she didn't love me, she just left, or whatever it was. I was too young to process. But you and I had a conversation, and I wanted to bring it up on the show because it is so important. I asked you where your strength and confidence, came from, and you mentioned the love of your grandfather and your father when you were little. Can you share a little bit about that?
Absolutely, absolutely. I was very blessed. My grandfather was in my life until I was 15, and sadly found him dead. And my father was in my life until 8. And my parents were in the relationship of doing harm to each other, and they were doing the best that they can, but they were in the relationship of insanity. And as a child, I found myself from about age 3.5, when my brother was born, parenting my parents, breaking up violent fights. And my mother was a rageaholic, and that was my normal. So when I'd go around the neighborhood and visit other families for a rest and a cup of milk and some cookies, and watch how lovely their homes were, as a child, I was sort of thinking maybe it was me. Now, that didn't stick, because my grandfather and my maternal grandfather and my father absolutely adored me. My mother was one of 2 daughters, so she was very concerned to have a son. Sadly, I came along first, in her eyes. And I also was quite a precocious, well ahead of my time, articulate child that these 2 men just delighted in. I was very precious and treasured. So for me, for the first 8 years with my dad, I was adored, but there was a schizophrenia of violence where he, as an alcoholic, would come home drunk, and then these fights would happen where, I think, relieving the pressure, my mother would rage out. And of course, alcoholism, anger is only 1 letter away from danger. That's my mantra when I'm around anyone drinking. If they're angry, I'm very cautious and conservative, and conscious of my space. Now, my grandfather was around until I was 15, and he had a terrible relationship. Him and my mother had, again, a terrible relationship. And being an adored child by him between my father and my grandfather, caused a lot of disconnect between my mother and I. But I don't have, I come from a family of secrets, so I don't really know. But the gift I got from the men in my life was I was adored. I could do nothing wrong. They celebrated how bright I was. They loved how cuddly I was. They enjoyed how articulate I could be. And they were very protective of me. But of course, I lost my main protectors very early. And my mother kept us very isolated. But that created for me this layer of confidence, of feeling loved, that made my mother's behavior and our isolation, it felt unworthy. It was not a good place to be, and not something I would do to my children or grandchildren.
That's remarkable. And so you lose your grandfather, but also at around the same age, you're offered this opportunity to model.
Oh, yes. My mother was horrified. Now, my heritage on both sides of the family is Yorkshire and Welsh. That means you can be as wide as you're high, or in smart girl language, I'm a curvy girl, and very happy in my curvy self because I'm very healthy. My mother, on the other hand, was very petite, very English rose, and just beautiful, absolutely beautiful. I myself was a tomboy, etc. But in the 70s, there was this switch from the sort of skinny twiggy to the sort of more curvy look. And I got invited by a modeling agency because I had great feet, great hands, but I had the confidence to carry the curves. So I really enjoyed that. And that happened to me when I was 16. And I loved it. My mother was horrified. I am blessed.
Why?
Well, because I was a big girl. And, you know, I was more like a size 14, not a size 8.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother was very slim. She really was very beautiful in her own way, and with beautiful curves. But I was more on the cuddly side. So she was horrified. She's like, "You're so embarrassing."
Yeah. She said those words to you.
Yeah, you're so embarrassing. And And I had been invited, and I was a teenager. So I leant very much into being rebellious, because at 15, I started racing cars on racetracks as well.
Oh my God.
So, and rebuilding hot rods and vintage cars. Like, I was a real tomboy. So, you know, when you're around 15, 16, and you're starting to not be so awkward and gawky, being invited to model was just, wow. So I said yes. My mother said no, but I got myself there and did that. And takeaways here, I also did a deportment course through the same school. So learning how to eat in formal dining occasions, learning how to present yourself in different groups, whether it's an elite or a community organization, learning how to walk into a room, shoulders back, you know, with deportment was very powerful. And yes, we did have to put a book on our head. I was a tragedy at that, I would confess. And I also was offered opportunities in New Zealand and Australia, and this is around the same, just before Rachel Hunter, the ex-wife of Rod Stewart. So New Zealand was putting out some pretty good Kiwi girls, right? Yeah. But for me, I did not like the lifestyle. If I wash my hair, it just dries. The only makeup you'll catch on me is lipstick, because I love bright colors. When you're a model, you cannot step out of the house because your look is your brand. And when I realized people would see better than they think, I did not enjoy not being able to be in conversation because they'd think I was empty-headed. But also starving myself to be a size, well, I never got to an 8, down to a 12, was miserable. I did not like myself. And I just really wasn't into trying to do all the hairstyling, because I'm not very dexterous with tools like that. And I hated wearing makeup. I felt really uncomfortable. So I stepped away from that. But I had a blast. I had an absolute blast. For some reason, they kept dressing me very French.
That's remarkable. So what happens next on your path? Because you've had multiple careers since then. And so...
Yes. Well, I headed off to surf my way around Australia as a late teen. I was 17, 18. I bought a round the world ticket and I headed off to Australia to surf. And I only worked to maintain my lifestyle. And I was going to Wales, and I met a lovely, wonderful man who was we became very good friends. And I was like, I don't want to get married. I don't want to have kids. And he says, well, what do you want? I'm like, I want a career. I want a university degree and my own business and my own home. He said, okay. I said, but I don't want to get married and I don't want to have kids. Yeah. He was a very clever person. So anyway, he lured me to Bermuda, telling me the surf was great. So you know this is pre-internet, right? Or I would never be in a country surrounded by 10 miles of reefs and no surf, except when the hurricanes come up the alley. And then sadly, he died before we were married 10 years. So I went from being a happy homemaker, before the children went to school, to suddenly finding myself widowed at 27.
Oh, man.
Yeah. So that led me into an opportunity to be a broker to the Fortune 500. Ladies, I'm sitting at my desk. I'm an administrator, and one of the executives in the company is like, the broker just left. He said, you're cute. You talk to people. Get on the phone. So I found myself broking, and I was only one of a couple of women. And boy, I am so grateful that I have 4 children, and I had 2 sons and 2 daughters. Well, these blokes in black suits, I would have to kind of think of them, well, if they were my boys, what would I say to kind of manage the late 80s, early 90s broking?
Oh my God, being a broker in the late, oh my God, I can only imagine that. Holy hell.
Oh yeah, it was fun. And did I mention I'm not a very good domestic director? I do not know how to make coffee. And I remember this one time, my very first broking meeting with a big automaker. I came in, I had a fire engine red suit with the shoulder pads. I was not looking like nobody's secretary, right? And there's all these executives in their black suits around their table with their tongues hanging out wanting coffee, which I totally missed because, you know, I'm up very early in the morning with 4 kids. And of course, I sit down to do this multi-million-dollar deal. And the first thing out of their mouths was how they took their coffee. Now, I am sitting there saying, my job is on the line. I'm the primary breadwinner. I cannot afford to lose my job. And these blokes could actually cost me my job if I can't make coffee. So I thought, best effort, girl, get in there. So I went into the kitchen. And I don't know if you may do because you may be coffee drinkers, but apparently you're meant to put a filter in.
Oh, no, you didn't put the filter in?
I didn't know about that either. Anyway, so I put the tray of coffee on the table with lots of things floating in it. And the blokes, you know, all looking like... So I just pulled the mother card and said, you know what, kitchen's that way. If you need coffee bad enough, I bet you make it better than I do.
Oh, good for you.
That's
good
remarkable.
For you.
But this is an example of sharing where you fail fast and just own it up.
And own it up.
Yeah.
That's the lesson.
I was a very good broker and I did damn good deals. Secret confession here. My kids used to play baseball on the American base. And the underwriters all had kids around the same age. So we'd be all standing on the sideline watching t-ball or baseball. And we'd all get talking and, you know, they couldn't help themselves. They would be grumbling about automakers and the current issues and the callbacks, blah, blah, blah. And I'm going, So I was into risk management very early before it became a professional designation. And I'd go back to my automaker clients and say, I think the brokers would love to hear about what you're doing about these callbacks and all the rest of it. And they're like, how do you know about this?
That's market research 101 right there. Go talk to the
right
client.
there.
Yeah.
So I was able to sort of position them. If you can explain to them how you're managing these issues and these high-level loss areas, we can get you a better deal.
There you go.
Motherhood and work, it was in my to my benefit to be at baseball.
Nice.
Making coffee.
That's wonderful. So how long were you in that position and what led you to follow the breadcrumbs somewhere else?
Well, I actually argued my way into law school in 4 hours and had 3 weeks to get there. And now this was the early 90s and there was a recession. Consequently, last on was first off. So I had my first run-in with redundancy and I ended up going to law school on $5,000 a year, house sitting in the greatest mansions in the world, flying as an inboard courier. And it was in the days where you could put things on credit card and as long as you made a $5 or $10 payment, you stayed in good standing. Yeah, so then I went off to law school and during law school, I went and worked for some of the most amazing companies in the world. I had the chance to be working on satellite launches in the 90s, which now gives us all this amazing Internet of the Skies, the telecommunications, the transportation, the utility grids and things like that. And I also got to work on some amazing companies because I was figuring out what do I do next as a lawyer. And then within 3 years, I was the general counsel for a multinational, and I really enjoyed that. So when I got to the turn of the century, I felt like I had contributed enough to the bottom line, and I could see that there was a lot of predatory financing going on, and with the changes in employment and things like that, that people were not as secure as they'd once been with contracts and that. So I started a social enterprise law firm, which will be 20 years old, February 2022.
Wow.
Damn, girl.
Michelle, just before we go on, at any point, there's no point in this story that I'm hearing that you were held back by your weight, that you doubted yourself because of your weight, that you're showing up in boardrooms with hot red suits, you're owning up to the fact that you're not a great domestic manager. You're raising 4 kids. Your heart must have been broken. You lost your husband and you're just pushing forward, grabbing opportunities as you go.
Emma, I think it was because I was soul-led that I was where I got called to go, I was willing to step. And also, by the time I was 40, I had been proposed to 13 times.
That was my next question.
So of all the things, any women who were like, nobody will ever love me because I'm 200 pounds, I'd go, well, I'm 200 plus. And because if a man likes a curvy girl, he likes a curvy girl. But all men like women they can make happy. And all men love to come home to a woman who smiles and is glad to see them.
So true.
If you're not, they're not going to stay around.
Yeah.
We talked about that, the importance of smiling.
Yeah. Where did you get then the confidence to take the step wherever you were led?
Sorry, I've got someone banging. Is it coming through?
We can hear it now.
Thank you. Where did I get the confidence? I think a couple of things. I feel that being well loved as a young girl through to 15 gave me my foundation, especially in the face of not necessarily being accepted by society or my mother for being a curvy girl. Now, I happen to be very healthy. So if I have a health impact, yes, the obesity will be an issue. And it certainly is always on my dashboard to deal with. I'm consciously working out what do I need to do to manage that. But I am happy and I am healthy and I have birthed 4 healthy children and 4 healthy grandchildren. If you think a few pounds is a problem, have at it. But it's not my problem. My problem is to reduce my weight, which I'm actively working on in a healthy manner. But I'm working on metabolism now, as I've shared with Emma. I'm using a device called a Lumen to try and increase my metabolism scores. And my score right now, I'm 62. My score is ranking in at someone in their 40s. So in 3 months, I've moved at 13 points.
That's amazing.
That's a testament to happiness, to just being a joyful, happy person. So here you are in the C-suite. You're not a doctor yet. So there's more to the story.
Yes, doing the social enterprise for the first 7 years, I'd done over 3 million in pro bono work. So I did my master's in philanthropy to try and see what I could do in the public sector to have policy more aligned for how we address social and environmental problems. And the social enterprise and the master's led me into doing my doctorate, which was with the top 20% of global CEOs in the world. So I went in to have conversations with, using a word David Corton created, how to find a fulcrum point, like on a child's seesaw, for the sacred money market and people and planet. So having had 4 privileged careers and always been conscious, having been a single parent, of how hard it can be to be raising children on your own, be it a mother or a father or a grandmother, I was very conscious always about giving back and providing access to justice. Justice is seen to be done, and justice is actually done. So those were very important to me. But what I realized was I live in one of the 3rd to 5th richest countries in the world. And there are companies here that have got GDPs that are bigger than most nations in the world. So I got very interested in global CEOs. And in my doctorate, I was very surprised that they actually talked to me, because who wants to talk about challenging the sacred money market and, balance it with the environment and social issues and good governance? And my fieldwork actually doubled. Instead of doing a thesis of what my chief supervisor said, a thesis where everyone tells you, no, Michelle, is a valuable research. I'm like, no, it's not. And not for me. So my fieldwork actually doubled in numbers and almost doubled in time. So where I asked for 30 minutes once a month, these CEOs were talking to me up to an hour and a half, 2 hours once a month, and in person. Every one of them made the effort to meet up in person. So
why do you think that was?
Well, I actually discovered that you can be quite isolated in the C-suite, and you have to say the company line. Well, I know that. But these CEOs were very concerned about people and planet. Like, they felt like Janus on one side, profit at any price, and on the other side, I've got children, grandchildren, I'm part of these community groups. I don't like being so destructive.
That's remarkable. And how has that led you to this movement of being a living legend and inspiring others to be the same?
I really appreciate you asking. This is a very new pivot for me. I'm in a book collaboration writing a chapter about my grandmother, and this was like a divine wink. I realized that when I was in the C-suite and the business world and at large, I would never mention my children. I would not mention my family. Those eyes would roll and say, okay, she mentioned someone had chicken pox. She's going to be gone, right? Because we don't have a wife and mother showing up like the men do, right? And then I was surprised to realize, and somewhat ashamed, that I also would not mention my 4 grandchildren in business settings. And so when I decided to do the book collaboration, and I felt such a huge pull to speak about my paternal grandmother, who, like me, had spoken truth to power, I thought, wow, I see so many similarities, but I want to celebrate and validate the visibility of women in ways that are not being captured. And then it got worse. I did some research, and an American statistic by the US Census Bureau tells us that there are 3.5 million grandparents in the workforce. So we have 5 generations in the workforce. Generation Z joined around 2018, I think. But the research, the literature, the books are about grandparenting, and predominantly they've engaged with grandfathers. Now, I don't know about you ladies, but it is typically the mothers and the grandmothers and the aunties who are taking days off for dentist, sports days, health visits, chicken pox. And, you know, so the research just was not there. And I was like, how could this be? So I did my chapter on that, and I've created a series for my podcast interviewing women around the world who are predominantly in the corporate world about their 19th and 20th century grandmothers. And each conversation has led to, like me, wow, like my grandmother, I am confident. I am speaking truth to power. I am powerful. And these powerful women are like going, and I'm like, these conversations need to be out in the world. So I will circle around to 20th century grandmothers, but I wanted to capture as far back as I could. At the moment, I've gone back to a great grandmother in her 90s in Belgium who was talking about her grandmother. So I've gotten back to the 19th century.
Wow.
That's remarkable. And what is the intention behind writing this chapter in this book and the Living Legends movement?
What I realized when I was 50 and I went to do my doctorate, that with my health profile, I might live to 125. Now, when you're 50, you kind of think you may have a couple of decades left.
Yeah.
And then maybe another, if you're unlucky, a decade of not so great health. But with the advances in medical technology and quality of life and health, subject to the pandemic, of course, we're living a lot longer, a hellishing lot longer than any of our relatives before, which will include the one directly behind me. My mother's still alive but has dementia. So when I realized that, and then I saw that the neuroscience was telling us that the human brain over 50 was the most creative and innovative, most intelligent. So I thought, why not do a doctorate at 50? But it does not like stress. So I, at 50, did not want to be litigating in all of the courts. I did not want to be handling multiple files and a lot of drama. And when I saw the neuroscience, I was like, well, my brain is actually right. For my quality of life and well-being, I need to not be doing 60, 80, 100-hour work weeks in highly dramatic situations. And then the last thing was somebody posted on LinkedIn, your last career change might be at 105. I actually had my aha moment. I was like, oh yeah, I'm not sure I'll be retired at 105. Not if I'm in good health and I have something to contribute. I would like to continue and serve.
Good for you.
Yeah, and then a couple of times I've been introduced and people have read my my career path and my contributions and awards, And I've kind of looked over my shoulder like, oh, who were they talking about? Why am I standing up here? So between having to step into the validation and celebration of women, I have to be first to step forward and do that. And when I look at what I consider a living legend to be, it is someone, and this is age agnostic. I'm not saying you have to be over 40 to be a living legend. There are young ones who are so entrepreneurial and creating such amazing gifts for the world. It's just all about flourishing, finding satisfaction, and making high-level contributions that have an impact.
Mm-hmm. That's remarkable. What would be your top tip to share with those who are curious about many things, but not wanting to disrupt the mundane? How do you lean into curiosity?
Well, I'd actually like to give an example. My influencer would be Oprah. She is a curvy woman. She's been a TV host. She's been an acclaimed film actress. She's been an author. She's just done, when you look at all the things she's done way more than I have. She's a few years older, not by much, but she's a couple of years older. But you know what I mean? That's in a living legend. And if you look at where she came from, similar to me, I'm a coal miner's granddaughter coming from that broken home with no funds. You know, I saved up for a ticket and I left with $300 when I was 17 to travel the world. I mean, I did not even realize $300 would not last a week, you know.
Yeah, that's so true.
So I think, yeah, so if you're curious to do this, I would say pull out your CV and have a look. And if you've been somewhere too long or you're dissatisfied, dream a little. Dream it, create the vision board, imagine what you would do, because that is what gives you the wind beneath your wings to try. And then find your soul tribe, because when I started the social enterprise and when I started the podcast, I did not tell my friends, colleagues, or families, because coming from the C-suite to start a whatever it was, people didn't know if I was a charity or just a back of town firm, or and then starting a podcast at 60. You know, I have a grandson who's 18, who's a YouTube, you know, he's an online superstar, right, in his own right. He's a 1%er. He's now looking at me and saying, what are your strategies? How did you get in the top 10% on the global charts? Like, what are you doing? You know, but if I told him in the beginning, he would have been, And of course, I can hear my mother's voice. You're so embarrassing. What are you doing?
Wow. And how do you push through that voice?
I actually take the position of a secretary. So I call them, sorry, ladies, the itty bitty committee.
We can say it.
And then I take the position of being a secretary, because I have found at times they have valuable contributions to make to my life and my leadership. And I take the notes and then I say, thank you, they'll be filed, possibly in file 13, aka the trash, or I will pull out, what do I need to act on? If there is something there that I'm overreaching or overworking or being over responsible for, I will practice gratitude and contemplate, wrap prayer around that and meditate. But I now, particularly sit with all the isolation and that, have come to a place where I really value, lost my thought here. Oh, yes, I've come to value that thoughts and feelings are visitors. They are not welcome to stay always. And if I'm smart, I have boundaries and rules around how much I'll put up with.
That's remarkable. How much of a role do you think the universe has played in laying out the breadcrumbs for you to follow?
Well, I discovered through the Kepler satellite, which was launched in 2009, and I think only about 5 years ago, they found another universe. So we actually live in a multiverse. I would say I have been blessed with an excellent sense of humor. So whenever divine winks happen to me, like that chap coming out and saying, we need a broker, you're it, you're cute, you smile, you sound good. Yeah. Step up and have a go. I also take it as a duty to share my failures, because you're not the first person to go and step off a cliff. You're not the first person who's messed up, and I've got my fair share of it. But if you're able to share the failures and how you grew through it, you're gifting a path to someone else, the breadcrumbs, as you said, Emma.
Yeah.
Wow.
I love it.
That's beautiful.
What's next for you now?
Well, I'm leaning into the living legends, and secret confession. Every time I say it, I wait for my imposter syndrome goes, oh, somebody's got a bat somewhere and they're going to hit you over the head. How dare you? But a woman I really admire, this is Gail Watson of the Women Speakers Association. One day I said to her about 2 months ago, I said, I think I need to put my crown on and my Supergirl cape and say, I'm a living legend, you know? It's really funny. If I go to a cocktail party or something like that, people will say, are you a lawyer? And I go, no, I'm a podcaster. And they go,
yeah.
Yeah.
I go, why not? Go check it out. So I really think sometimes you just got to lean in and have a go. And if I fail, believe you me, I'll have some very funny stories to share that are much better than making coffee with grinds in it.
Oh, that's amazing.
I absolutely love this.
Well, thank you so much for being on this show. You are a living legend, and we will have you back anytime you would like to come back. Thank you so much.
Anybody who's watching the show who's ever doubted that, you know, you can't do this or you shouldn't lean into this because of the way you look, make it about how you feel. And if you feel good and you're happy and you're joyful and you're grateful, then you're unstoppable. Thank you so much, Dr. St. Jane.
Thank you.
I appreciate you both.